Because I had to go through like 5 different chats yesterday to keep everything running. And we are live once again with our newest guest, Suris the Skeptic. Suris, if you'd like to introduce yourself, you can do a better job of that than I can.
Oh, sure thing. Well, I'm pretty sure I'll also embarrass myself just as easily. I mean, if you were to agree with most of the things on my comment section, they probably describe me better than anybody else. Let's see here. Lame ass. Not very funny. Virgin has been labeled at me a few times. That one was weird. But if you were to hear me say it, I just hide behind a cartoon avatar and debunk things. So there's that.
Although, hey, we've got your actual face today.
True. That's I would say that's a rarity, but that happens to be a thing that happens on live streams. That's another thing that people freak out about for some reason. Whenever I do my regular videos, I get people who sit there and go, "Coward, won't even show your face," and I'm like, it would take you 5 seconds to click on literally half the other videos on here where my face comes up. But I'm glad that your research methods are just as good as the people you're simping.
Yep. But I'm not sure how you want to handle this. Do you have a presentation you'd like to give, or do it as a chat? It's up to you.
I think doing it as a chat is probably going to be the best thing. I haven't had time to prepare a presentation. Heck, actually, I've got 2 videos that I am attempting to take care of right now. Also, I just noticed my camera is very tilted. Here we go. No, I've had hell in a handbasket to deal with over on this end. One of the main issues is that we've got all kinds of debris on the property we picked up, and this morning was spent getting things set up so that they could take down an entire shed. And while taking down that shed, apparently electrical was in it, and we didn't know that. But the person with the chainsaw found out as he cut a wire. That was fun. Fun to deal with. Not really. And then I had to go realize that, oh wait, my house has 2 breakers. So yeah, no. There's just been a lot of other stuff going on that have caused me to be very late on projects that I should have been able to get done much easier and quicker, but turns out I'm actually very bad at time management. So here we are.
Fair enough. I have no problem with doing it as a chat. I mean, the last guy and I were in a chat type of situation. I do want to share. It turns out that one of my frequent listeners and fans is also a fan of yours. Teresa Hall, Gulf City Pagan, commented, "Hi, Suris. I discovered your channel about a month ago. I really enjoy your videos."
Awesome. Well, that is good to hear. I mean, whenever people actually enjoy my videos, that's great. Though the series that I'm doing on Wednesdays right now is going after certain comments from people who most certainly don't enjoy my channel. I thought I was going to get about 20 or 30. Turns out there were 275 at the time that I screenshotted them. There's probably more. Yeah, no, I just harvested off of 3 episodes, all the fans for A Call for an Uprising. Just grabbed a bunch of their comments from those 3 episodes, and it's just got so many more comments in there than I thought I would have. And it's a weird thing where on the one hand I'm like, holy crap, this is a lot of content. This means that my Wednesdays are basically spoken for a long time. This is really good. And on the other hand, I'm like, wow, there are people on the internet who really freaking hate me.
Yeah, there is, but that means you're doing something right.
Sometimes. I've learned from many of the people who I tackle on my channel. Many of them have the "if everybody thinks I'm wrong, then I must be doing something right" mentality, and you get to a point where you start to realize, wait a minute, hold on. Maybe some of the people who are upsetting people are upsetting them because they're actually jerks, not because they're right. And it's been so I'm not a huge fan of that mentality myself, only because I know that I've seen so many people use that mentality as a shield where they're like, you seem really mad at what I'm saying. I must be doing something right. And I'm like, yeah, you're doing something right. You're being a jerkwad and you're doing a great job at it. I'm here to congratulate you.
I will say from experience, it's who you're ticking off that makes me say that you're doing something right. Because there are people
True.
in this world that need somebody to tick them off and offend them.
Well, I can agree with that. If the only people you're ticking off are like hardcore right-wing extremists and religious fundamentalists, then yeah, at that point, maybe I'm willing to let that mentality sit for a little longer.
Yeah.
But if it's that you're ticking off like, most of your regular day everymen, unless you've got a really good reason that ticking them off actually works in your favor, then I'm still not the biggest fan of that particular mentality.
This is true.
I know it's like when I do videos and I'm just a little sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I might be being more facetious than I need to be here. Critiquing capitalism just a bit in some of my videos. I know that there are some people that get really mad at that, and I'm just sitting there going, well, what issue do you have? Because then those people get really mad. And if it's somebody who's just like a business owner and they're really upset, and I just sit there and go, well, do you do work in your business? Yes. Okay, cool. Well, you still kind of control that under socialism, so nothing really changes for you. It's not like the state suddenly starts controlling your means of production. That's not how it works. So sometimes when there are people upset, you can kind of dismiss it as, okay, this person doesn't actually understand the thing I'm talking about. But those are exceptions to the rule as opposed to the hard and fast rule.
Sure, I just think in terms of yourself and then one of yesterday's presenters who's currently in the chat, Virgo Triad. Both of you tend to piss off people, in my opinion, that deserve to be pissed off because of the fact that you're dealing with the religious fundamentalists, the conspiracy nuts that are actually endangering people. And it's like, those people, not the reasonable people. Case in point, you're not, I'm a religious person. I've never made a secret of that. You're not. You don't piss me off. I don't always agree with you, but I respect what you have to say.
I think who's one person that I wouldn't mind getting very angry. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Stykes and Hammer, but he's not a religious person, but he's a person who I actually have no problems pissing off. But that's just me.
Teresa brought up something that's a good point. Which would be someone I don't think you would mind pissing off any more than I do, except for the fact that he's potentially dangerous, which would be Steven Anderson.
Oh, I have no problem pissing off Steven Anderson. In fact, I know Steven Anderson knows of me, and I know that he's also hid from me in a... I challenged him to a debate about 2 years ago, and he never responded to that debate, but I know that he's seen it because I have the Facebook message that shows that I was left on red. But no, I wouldn't mind pissing him off, and I know that I have at least a little bit. And I've also pissed off some of his cronies. The video that I did last year when the NIFB was setting up for their first Massa conference, of course, they're working on their second one now because...
And on Halloween, no less.
Yeah. They're like, oh, it's going to be super symbolic. Yeah, it is. It's going to be really symbolic. People can actually eat candy to your failures. That's going to be great.
Plus, let's face it, Tommy McMurtry has now confirmed that he is sexually attracted to pumpkins.
Well, Tommy McMurtry can confirm or deny it. We all know that the meme lives on regardless.
I think, he picked Halloween. He's not even hiding it anymore.
I need the Master Conference to be on Halloween. That's when all the pumpkins will be coming out. It was really agitating to me, though, just a little bit, that many of those people get upset whenever you tackle someone like Steven Anderson, and they go, oh, you're just mad that he's using his freedom of speech to say his opinion. And then, of course, the video that I did on Steven Anderson, the Steven Anderson is gay video, that one gets hit for hate speech, of all things. And it successfully gets hit for hate speech at that. YouTube agreed with taking it down. And I'm just sitting there like, wait, hold on. Steven Anderson can keep his videos on the platform without them being called hate speech, but a YouTube poop making fun of the fact that he called himself gay in
Repeatedly.
jest, that's too far. That's and it that alone is officially my argument whenever somebody says that I'm thin-skinned in regards to like Anderson or Powell or anything, and like, no, pretty sure it's actually the people who simp for them. I'm 90% certain that I would consider them much more thin-skinned because their definition of a video that needs to be taken off the internet is it makes fun of my senpai. My definition of a video that needs to be taken off the internet is it says kill another human being. I feel like one is at least a more fair litmus test. The other one, not so much.
And for anyone who's listening or listens later who doesn't know, Steven Anderson and MASA, Make America Straight Again, are the people openly calling for the government to mass execute people of the LGBT community.
They actually say that it's better for the government to do it because it's the government's job to take care of people who broke the law. But their definition of the law is anything the Bible says is wrong. Oh, but if you actually talked to them about Leviticus, because if they appeal to Romans, you just pull them back to Leviticus again. Because, God, I have to go into theology now for half a second. Would you agree that when Paul is talking about homosexuality in the New Testament, he is having to reference back to the documents of the Old Testament to come to his conclusions?
I would agree.
Okay. And would you agree that Leviticus has at least 3, if not 6, different interpretations if we're talking about the particular line where it says that if a man is with another male as if with a woman, then that is something that is abhorrent and they need to die. That particular, and obviously I'm paraphrasing it, but if memory serves, in all the times that I've researched it, and all the times that I've researched that passage, it always comes back to being that passage can mean homosexuality is something that you should be stoned to death for. It can also be a critique on pedastry, because the term male as opposed to the term man can mean young boy. It could also be a passage where it's telling you not to cheat on your wife. Do not take another person into the bed of your wife. And those are all different translations that can come from Leviticus, which means that at the end of the day, while there is a translation of that is incredibly bigoted, there are others that are possible that are not. And everything in the New Testament is predicated on that passage anyways. So if he wants to refer back to it or go to other passages repeatedly, you could literally just hammer him with his own Bible. And I think that makes him uncomfortable.
I agree. And like you said, there are multiple interpretations. And some of those interpretations, it's like, if we're all gonna start saying that people who actually, child molesters, people who actually prey on children should be executed, that's not nearly that controversial. I'm not necessarily advocating that, but that's a lot less controversial than homosexuals need to be executed.
Yeah, it's a very different thing being said there. And I recognize there's usually a pushback from atheist viewers whenever I say or what I said about Leviticus, where they'll go, well, it doesn't matter that it can be translated that way. What matters is that it's being used in this way. And I agree. I agree that it matters that people take that passage and try to use it as a justification to say that, in Anderson's case, gay people need to be executed. I understand and agree that that's a problem. It's literally the reason why I bring up that, oh, by the way, you could be wrong about your interpretation here. Because what I think a lot of people don't get is that critique from without, like strictly critique from without your in-group, doesn't always land as well as critique from within. So if you say, like, for instance, you take a religious fundamentalist and they say, my Bible says kill X person, and you say, well, then don't listen to your Bible. That's less convincing than letting them know, hey, your Bible might not necessarily say kill this person. Like one of those is more convincing from somebody who's thoroughly convinced that their book is the end all be all of truth.
I agree with you completely, and particularly one of our listeners, Chibi Dicebotch, has made, I think, an excellent point along the lines, which is if you go to Leviticus, for Christians specifically, as opposed to a Jew, if you go to Leviticus, that's like saying that Christ's sacrifice isn't enough for wiping the slate clean and building a better world for this by that standpoint. And
because if you go strictly by Leviticus, then Christ's sacrifice isn't enough to handle this one particular sin.
And lots of other ones. And just also the reality of all the other things in Leviticus and Deuteronomy that Christians don't follow anymore. Or in many cases never did.
True, though I know that it's not somebody's like raw dismissal of a point doesn't mean that they have a reason to legitimately dismiss that point. But I have seen that when you bring up that there are other things that are not followed, like the issue of mixed fabrics or shellfish, they usually scoff and dismiss that. I know that's not that doesn't mean that they're right to do so, but because I've seen them do that, I've generally stopped using that particular phrase myself. Because if I find that that a particular turn of phrase immediately turns my interlocutor off, like turns them away from listening to me, that turn of phrase stops being useful to me in the same way as one that actually elicits conversation is.
And that's I hadn't considered that. That's actually a really good point. Is if they're not going to listen to you anymore, what's the point? You're trying to get a dialogue open and getting them to think about what they're saying.
Yeah, you can be. It's one of those things where it's like a marriage almost, where sometimes it's less important to simply be correct and more important to just kind of take into consideration what your spouse's wishes are. This is a thing that I've seen ask any couple that's been married for 30, 40 years. Not having to desperately need to be right all the time is one of the things that let them continue their relationship. It's kind of the same deal there where yes, while technically me bringing up that point might be correct, and while yes, it is the counterpoint that shows that they're being hypocritical, if my goal is to elicit a dialogue with this person for any length of time, does me being right about this facilitate that? And if no, maybe it's not the best tool for the job.
This is true. You don't want to win the battle to lose the war, as it were.
Correct. You get to sit there and go, I was right on the internet. Okay, but what did you do? I was right on the internet. This is one of the reasons why, even though I do believe that if Christianity had less of a stranglehold on the world, Islam as well, because if you pulled one out, the other would simply just be that much stronger. While I do believe that is the case, that the world would be better with those two religions having much less power, maybe being as prevalent as something like paganism is normally, that would make the world a better place, but it's less useful to me in trying to make that better world to try to tell those people don't be Christian, because at the end of the day, that's not going to convince them. Letting them know that, hey, you can still follow your Bible and just not be an asshole. That tact tends to work a lot better. Now, if one of them deconverted, cool, great, awesome, what have you. You're now on my side of the fence. That doesn't do anything for me if you're still an asshole.
Because let's face it, there are plenty of assholes that are atheists.
Oh yeah, that's the reason why. 2 years ago, I did a video about arguments against God that I said that atheists need to stop using. And one of the ones was that when they said there's atheists that say that religion's a mental illness, and that is one of the ones that I kind of hammered on and said, no, if you are going to say religion's a mental illness, and we agree that mental illnesses are a thing that you can kind of help, but you don't really have the ability to cure them, then what did you do by leaving religion? Did you suddenly find a panacea? Did you just fart in the face of medical science, or are you just using a phrase that you find provocative simply so that you can, claim intellectual high ground for a little bit. And if it's that one, why are you even saying it in the first place?
That's a really good point.
Like, I get that kindergarten was a really fun place, and all of us remember being able to get a cookie whenever we did really well. But this is not the thing that got you a cookie in kindergarten. This is the thing that got you time out. So whenever I hear that one in particular, one, it makes me upset because I don't understand why people are doing it. Two, when I made that video, and I specifically said that one was one I had an issue with, my comment section had atheists in it desperately defending their need to be able to call religion a mental illness. And I'm just sitting there like, I mean, thank you for the free content, because your comment will now show up in a later video. I actually had one of those comments show up when I did a follow-up to that video with Prophet Abzad. I had one of those comments show up in that video. And it's like with the call for an uprising stuff. Like, I'm happy that you've made my job that much easier, but I kind of wish that my job didn't exist either. Like, that the world in which I don't think I have to do the thing I do is actually a better world than the one we're in right now. So I'm only so thankful that you made my job easier.
Just like a point I've made with them once, it's like, I want a world where I don't need to tell people don't be assholes.
Yeah,
particularly don't be assholes. Because my thing with LGBT and a lot of other things, I don't care. Do what makes you happy, as long as it's consensual. It's like we need to live in a world where people remember this idea of mind your own business.
Or even so, recognize that even if you're not minding your own business, you don't have to be a jerk about how you go about things. There's a difference between, as an example, let's say that you're the type of person who grew up in a house that said that being gay is wrong. Instead of just kind of taking that knowledge, false as it may be, and running with it, living in a world where people questioned, wait, well, why is being gay wrong? Why was I told that this was a bad thing? And then kind of getting to the bottom of it and realizing that sometimes people are just scared of things they don't understand. Like, I know that there are people who, when you bring up the possibility of them being any sexuality besides the one that they are, it freaks them out. They get very visibly upset. And I think it's those kinds of people that are most scared of anything that looks like them but does not act like them. So when they see a guy who might be interested in other guys, that's a scary thing, because what if they potentially could be interested in other guys? And I get that that's sometimes a scary thing, but on the other end of things, I think if people were less scared of things that they find terrifying like that, or at least try to figure out, well, why do they find it terrifying? That would also help facilitate the world being a better place. Like, take a racist, for example. White supremacist racist says that whites are the best and blacks should be subservient. If they actually sat down and questioned why for a minute, maybe they would start to, basically through the Socratic method, come back to realize, oh, wait a minute, I don't have a good reason for this. So they go, whites are the best, blacks are bad. Well, why? Well, FBI statistics say this. Okay, well, in a world where FBI statistics say that, would we not put more police officers in areas that just happen to be black neighborhoods, and then those statistics would literally always perpetually be that way, and they could not change? Well, maybe. Well, what about IQ? Okay, well, why is IQ a good measuring device? Like, people can be high IQ and be absolutely fucking idiotic. Okay, well, maybe IQ is not a good one. And then when you start kind of systematically running through that, you hit the point where you're like, wait a minute, are they just different than me? And that's the thing I find scary. Like, yeah, that's probably it. Just like with homosexual people, just like with people who are of a different religion than you or don't have a religion that you do, sometimes it's just that they look like you, they're human, but they don't act like you, and that's terrifying.
It's a good. I should have thought that point through, but that's a really good point. I'm just also thinking. Do you know the story of Daryl Davis?
Daryl Davis? No, I do not.
You'll find this interesting, I think. So Daryl Davis is a musician. He was, he played mostly blues. He's a black guy. He played typically a lot of blues.
Mm-hmm.
But for a period in his career, blues wasn't that popular. Musician wants work. You play what people want. So he started playing country, which is very similar to blues in a musical sense.
Mm-hmm.
And he's playing in a country bar, and he finishes the set, and this guy comes up to him, "Can I buy you a drink? You play the piano really well. You play the piano like Jerry Lee Lewis." And he sits down with the guy, and they're talking, and him and this other two white guys, and the one goes, "I never thought this would happen." And he looks, Daryl looks at him and goes, "What? That I, a KKK member, would be sitting and having a drink with a black man." And he's become quite famous because Daryl has a very unusual collection. He has a collection of hoods from members of the Ku Klux Klan that have all been voluntarily given to him.
Basically, people who, after meeting him, realized that, oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm the stupid one.
Yeah. People that, Grand Wizards and all the other self-important names they use, but people who had grown up in the Deep South that didn't really know any black people on a personal level. And he didn't preach to them. There's circumstances. There's a movie about him on Netflix that was on Netflix, probably still is, where he talks about having a local Klan leader call him how this one bus company won't rent a bus to them because they're trying to have a meeting, and the bus company, understandably, doesn't want to support the Klan. And Daryl just volunteered a bus. It's like, "Hey, I know somebody who has one. I'll get you a bus." And just by being a normal, nice, decent human being, without preaching, without trying to tell them they're wrong, these Klansmen, lifelong, generational Klansmen, are leaving the Klan and saying, "I don't want this anymore." He's trying to build a museum of Klan robes.
Yeah, because people start to realize after a while that not only are these people not that different than I am, they're not as bad as I've been taught. Like, there are people who've grown up in the Deep South years ago who were told that black people are nothing more than like mindless monsters. This is a thing that people like Ben Shapiro actually still perpetuate a little bit.
Unfortunately,
where they had this narrative that black people are mindless monsters that are completely beholden to whatever system they're over. So, like, if they're acting proper, they're acting white, and if they're acting black, they must be acting bad. And that's kind of a stigma that I've seen a lot, and it's really frustrating. But it all comes from a misconception of what the other is. You think the other is bad, so the other must do all these horrible things, like Christians who think that atheists are all horrible, or not mindless monsters, but like horrible neckbeards on the internet who just want to spend their entire time proving God is wrong, when half the time it's like, no, most of us don't care. We just would rather a world where you're not hurting people and then hiding behind a book. And on the flip side, there are atheists who've grown up their entire lives as atheists and can't fathom a world in which they were born differently, a world in which they were born into a theist home and grew up as a theist. That's a thought that doesn't occur to a lot of them. And I think a lot of them are the ones that perpetuate that religion's a mental illness type dumbfuckery that happens. Because it's not using the veil of ignorance is what it's called, not accounting for the fact that you might have been born into completely different circumstances, and that would change your perspective.
Would you explain what the veil of ignorance is for folks?
So the veil of ignorance is a tool you can use for determining. It's mainly used for determining whether something could be moral or immoral, but I think it's best used in terms of legality. So let's say that you are writing a law, and in writing this law, you are trying to account for the law doing the most good and hurting the least amount of people. The best way to do this is to use what's called the veil of ignorance. What the veil of ignorance is that when giving any moral proposition, you take away who you are. You basically put on a literal veil of ignorance. You're completely ignorant of who you are. And when you write this law, when you remove the veil, you come out on the other side not as yourself, but as the person who will most likely be negatively affected by this law. So as opposed to we talked about racism, so we'll use racism as the going forward thing here. As opposed to me being a racist and saying I think black people should be subservient, so I'm going to make a law that says that they have to drink from different fountains. That they have to be in different schools and they have to have designated separate sections in restaurants. So just Jim Crow laws. When you're using the veil of ignorance, you put on the veil, and then when you take it off, you are now a black person who's going to be affected by this. You can keep most everything you had before if you desperately need to, but just imagine that you yourself, nothing has changed, but now your skin's different. Like you just happen to be different. What's so fundamentally different about you that makes you deserve this mistreatment? And 9 times out of 10, when you use the veil, people realize that, oh, I wouldn't want this thing happening to me. Okay, cool. So then you go back on the other side of the veil and you write your moral proposition again. And then once you've written your moral proposition, step to the other side of the veil once more. You're now, again, the person who's most affected by this moral proposition. Does this negatively affect you, and is that effect fair? If not, step on the other side of the veil again. You don't know who you're going to be again when you write this thing, and it prevents you from making, in a perfect world, it prevents you from making laws that negatively affect people without there being good reason for it to do so. For instance, if I were to make a law that says that if you violently harm a child, then you get X amount of years in prison, then that's not quite the same thing, because now you've done an action and this is now reciprocal for your action. Whereas under the veil, you're not having done an action. This is taking the veil off to see you're just born differently. You've not done anything different in your life. You've not done anything here. You just happen to be something. Once you've removed the veil and you were previously ignorant of who you're going to be, now that you are this marginalized person, do you like the world you've stepped in? If you don't like that world, maybe reevaluate the world you've created.
It is a good tool, I think, and just, if nothing else, it's, I think, a useful thought exercise. Put yourself in the person you're affecting shoes.
Yeah, it's literally using logic to force empathy onto an individual is essentially what it ends up boiling down to being. You're not telling somebody, what if you were this person? You're literally going, how about we have a system where we construct a hypothetical world where you are this person? That's effectively, it's the same thing as saying, please have empathy, but it gets to people more than that, because there are people who will not step into somebody else's shoes unless you kind of systematically put them there that way. A good example of this that was actually done to me as a kid, my history teacher, when I was at West Florida High School of Advanced Technology, he had a really interesting tool for showing people what it was like to be a slave, like coming to the United States. You had just been bought, and you are now being shipped to the U.S. The way that he starts that lesson, and this is one of those things that when you hear it at first, it's really unconventional. But the way he starts that lesson is there's a line into his room. Normally, that line does not exist. Normally, you just walk into the classroom, sit down, and the lesson starts as normal. However, there's a line there. You don't know why this is the case, but you know that people are only being let in one at a time. Once somebody crosses the threshold of the door, their hands are duct taped behind their back, and he has all the desks arranged in a rectangle with an opening that you can walk into, and then he packs you into the corner of it. The next student comes in, they get duct taped to their hands behind their back, and they get shoved into that corner until you have every student packed so tightly together that it's... I don't want to say that there was a joke that came to mind, but that one's really, really dicey. So instead, packed together like sardines. We'll just go ahead and say that one. You're packed like sardines. You're bound. You can't move. And you're not allowed to use the restroom unless, of course, a medical emergency happens. And then the teacher begins the lesson. No explanation. And then he gets 10 minutes in, he gets to the point where he goes, so let's talk about what the living conditions were for people on the ships coming into the United States. You're currently sitting in them. And it was a very effective method of teaching. Like, this is, instead of showing a diagram of this is how people had to lay, this is what happened when people weren't able to use the restroom properly. No, he just says, you're going to live it. You're going to sit in that situation, and it's going to suck, and it's going to be uncomfortable, but you're never going to forget the lesson. And I knew that this wasn't the first time he'd done it, because the dean walked in and saw everybody around and goes, oh, we're talking about slave trade? He goes, yeah. She goes, okay, cool, and walks away. Which means that any kid that was thinking that they were going to be let out of the situation by the dean's behest, they were very mistaken. But that's literally applying the veil of ignorance. On the outside in the hallway, you're on one side of the veil. You don't know who you're going to be when you walk through that threshold. Once you walk through the threshold, you were bound and you were tied and you were shoved into a sardine can. You've woken up on the other side of the veil. Do you like the world you've constructed for yourself? If not, maybe it's time to reevaluate that world.
That is a really powerful way of teaching that lesson.
It is a lesson that I am incredibly thankful he taught me in the way he did, because I have never forgotten that particular lesson. It will probably never leave me.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's like, I wish I had history teachers that did that kind of thing. You know?
He was the history teacher who, when he made his PowerPoint slides, the other history teachers took his slides and used them, and everybody knew. Everybody knew that he was the gold standard, and everybody else just kind of copied off of what he did. Also, fun thing as well, he used to be a big Magic the Gathering player. So whenever we would finish tests, he would let people play Magic in class. So another fun thing is that his wife was the chemistry teacher. And when I was in her chemistry class, his wife actually... we were actually playing Magic in the back of the class. When the lesson was over, his wife got on to us. Their classrooms were adjoining. He heard his wife telling us to stop playing Magic, stepped through and said, no. They'll listen to you if we let them do this. He was a wonderful teacher. And it's always fun, like, as a kid, hearing like having a teacher that shares your interests, but also having a teacher that is not only willing to come to bat for you when things happen, but is more than willing to make your life a living hell to prove a point. Like, oh, maybe this is a teacher who actually cares about what we do, which is good.
I've been lucky enough to have those kinds of teachers over the years, and I know exactly what you mean. The ones that's like, nope, they care. They put the effort in. By the way, if you're wondering, this is Brian McKinley. He's slightly early, but he's the next victim on this merry-go-round.
Oh, well, I hear that on this merry-go-round nobody gets off, but that's mostly because we only taught abstinence-only education here.
Cute. Now, Brian is the godfather of vampire thrillers.
Okay,
Yeah, he's written a bunch of vampire novels, basically.
fair enough.
Hello.
Let me check. Actually, for that matter, I believe the two of you have chatted before because he was co-host when we had you on the radio show.
Oh, okay. My memory is also vapid.
That's perfectly fair.
Not a whole lot there. It's why I've never been good at tests, but I've always been good at presentations.
Well, also, you do a lot of YouTube videos with a lot of people. It's not that shocking to me that you might not remember him.
Yeah. Though, even if I didn't do a lot of YouTube videos with a lot of people, I still have the worst memory when it comes to people.
Which is also fair. We're coming up on the end of the hour. I wanted to give a quick chance in case anyone in the chat has any questions they would like me to ask. And of course, give you a chance. I put the link to your YouTube video in the channel in the description. But if you want to give yourself a moment to plug your channel and anything else you've got in the works, please do so.
So my main channel, I don't think needs very much plugging. I'm not terribly concerned about it, although
You're a little more well known than I am.
But I do have a gaming channel, which is just Suris/gaming. I wouldn't mind plugging that one, mainly because I've been working on projects for that'll go up there. And while I know that videos on my main channel do at the very least get some views, videos on the gaming channel don't really get views all that often yet. I'm not very well established in that sphere, but eventually, maybe one day I will be, but we'll see.
Link will be in the description, folks, if you're interested. And gaming is awesome, so I think that people should be interested.
It's a great stress reliever.
Indeed. Let's see. There we go. Edit. That's what I'm looking for. I don't see many questions in the comments, although you've definitely made a good impression on some folks.
There's not the one person that goes, why is he bad? Why is he a horrible person?
Nope. Particularly, we've had two friends of mine, one being Virgo Triad, who you think you get hated. She gets death threats serious enough that she's actually gone and contacted the FBI.
See, I've only had to contact the police.
Yeah, she's one of the biggest people in the anti-sovereign citizen movement here on YouTube.
Oh, I can see some of the sovereign citizens getting really upset at that. What bothers me about sovereign citizens is that they forget the fact that they literally live in a society, and that when you point that out to them, they get really upset for some reason.
So strange. And I put your, for people listening, and so that you know, the links to both your Suris channel and to Suris Gaming are in the description.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that.
No problem. It's easy for me to do, and it's the least I can do if you're going to be kind enough to come on. But, and Teresa Hall of CD Pagan did want to say, thank you, Suris. Very interesting conversation. Virgo also commented that very powerful and should be used more frequently, in her opinion.
Okay, I'd imagine that's for the teaching method.
Yes, and the general idea of the veil of ignorance, I think. Both of which I would wholeheartedly agree with her on. We need people to use that kind of thinking more, and that kind of teaching more often.
Oh yeah, there's only so much you can really. It's not that there's so much you can learn, but there's almost a plateau for how effective teaching is when you're using just the book. This is one of the reasons why I think teachers should be paid more. I really think facilitating creativity would be a very good thing. Like letting teachers be able to spend their entire summers not having to work second jobs, which happens a lot, but letting them have those summers just to come up with creative plans like that. Not that all of them will do it. Some of them are there just to fill out their tenure form. I've met my fair share of those.
As if I.
But at least having the opportunity be there, I think, is important.
No, I think that's a good point. Although there, of course, is the argument to be made that we should do away with 3-month summer vacations to begin with, just because of how it affects retention rates among students.
I think
But
I think that as an adult, if I were to tell a kid to not have their summer vacation, I would be that jerk. So I'm not 100% certain that I would be willing to do that, because I know that I have several good memories attached to summer vacation specifically.
so do I, to
Um,
be fair.
Mainly in that I'm a parent of, or not a parent, a child of a fractured household. So my dad lived in one city, and my mom lived in another city. Summer vacation was sometimes the only time that I had to spend lengthy amount of time with the side of the family that did not have primary custody over me. So I do think that situations like that are better facilitated by having that time off, but that's just me.
No, that's actually a good argument, because the usual thing people think of is in the older days when more children had to work on farms and things like that, and that's a large part of why we originally made 3-month vacations. But despite the fact that that circumstance has changed, although there's still students that is true for, there are other circumstances, like you said, with someone who has custody between two different parents in two different cities, where the system we have now does still make sense.
Yeah, because in the system we have right now, during summer vacation, I can spend time with my dad as a kid.
Yeah.
But under a system where I don't have that vacation, I don't have that ability, because any time that I spend over there has to be very, very temporary, because
Yeah.
I have to be able to make it back for school. Like that's so. I think, as opposed to having better retention rates being facilitated by summer vacation not being a part of the curriculum, I think having that vacation in there, not maybe shortening it a little bit, but doing away with some of the more industrial era teaching methods that we use right now. Because I think that's half the other issue, is that our standards right now are based on tests as opposed to being based on applicable results. And that's really frustrating, because I'm going to be honest, half the things I learned in school, I did not end up using in the real world. But for instance, that particular lesson about the slave trade has stuck with me as an argument against racism and things like that that have been useful in the real world. While the lesson itself might not have been, the actual thought process that came from it, I've been able to use ever since. So finding a system that facilitates more creative approaches like that, and fewer, I don't want to say less creative approaches, because that's really just kind of defaulting the answer.
Fewer standardized tests for a start.
That would certainly be a start for me. But having a system set up to where it's better for a person to perform in a way that functionally matters, as opposed to being able to perform insofar as they can answer things on a test better, because the real world doesn't care about those tests. It really doesn't.
I've never had a job ask me, so what grade did you get in your 11th year of English?
I was told so many times as a kid that the grade, like my GPA, would be a factor in whatever job I tried to get, and it never did.
Yeah,
it never came up.
They don't care. They there are plenty of jobs that care if you have a college degree, which is a whole other thing. But
yeah,
your
they care if you passed.
Yeah, your GPA, especially your GPA in high school. It's like, do you have a high school diploma? Yes. Moving on.
It's like, okay, we finished that part. We can continue on now.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do have as much fun as I have talking to you. We do have our next victim up on the chopping block, so I think it's probably time to move this along in the interest of giving everybody their chance.
Sure, I'll go ahead and hop in the meat grinder, and then the next person can come up, and there might be a meat grinder on the other side, but we've applied the veil, so you don't know.
Yep. I want to thank you for joining us. This has been a great deal of fun. I always enjoy talking with you. Hopefully we can do this again soon.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me on.
You're welcome. Have a good one. Brian?
I'll try my best to.
Yes.
You ready?
Yeah, I believe so.
Excellent. Okay, folks, so once again, I'm going to be ending this stream and starting a new one to keep separate videos for the sanity of people who have specific people they want to watch. Although I definitely think everybody should watch all of the wonderful presenters that we've had.
You're not going to cross the streams.
Exactly, my friend. So, Brian, you just sit tight. There's nothing you have to do for this process. It's all on me. People listening, just remember to switch to the new video in a minute or two when it's up. It won't take long. Okay, I don't want to leave. What am I doing? I want to end that stream.